I played Kid Icarus Uprising for the very first time of my life, after the Eliminator and one of my best mates have told me to play this game for over 10 years now. So let's get right to it. So yeah, it's been 10 years now. I remember my mate saying something along the lines of, "You're the biggest anime fan / weeb I know, but haven't played Kid Icarus Uprising? What's wrong with you?" So here I am, ready to play Kid Icarus Uprising. Apologies that it took so long. Let's get to it. So we start off with the main character of the game, called Pit, the servant of the goddess called Lady Palutena. And all she says is that the underworld army is invading the world, and then she tells me how the controls work. Lady Palutena says that the ruler of the underworld has been resurrected and wants to rule the world. Wow, what an introduction. Then she tells Pit that she is a goddess of light, and that it's her job to protect humanity from the ruler of the underworld called Medusa. And then we get introduced to her. And after that, we notice that the underworld army is attacking a town where a ton of innocent people live. So Pit, with Palutena's help, go to the town to save the innocent people from not only the army, but also the underworld faithful watchdog. And that's the first chapter, or level, you could say. What do I think? Well, first of all, I suck at this game. I'm really bad. Bruh, I'm usually a god, but not here. In chapter 2, we start off in the air, just like in the previous chapter, but not for very long. That's because Lady Palutena said in chapter 1 the reason Pit is flying was because of her magic. However, she can only do this for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, Pit's wings will burn up into flames. Once we land, Pit enters a castle. But this castle is the castle of the Dark Lord. Then after that, we get introduced to a human named Magnus, and then they come to an agreement to work together to defeat the Dark Lord Gowl. Apparently Gowl was a human after all of that. Interesting. As in the 2 previous chapters, we start off once again in the air. Thinking about it now, I think every chapter will start this way. My bad. Anyway, this is where we meet the heads of Hydra, and they are known to argue with themselves. Have a listen. Well, in this chapter our mission is to defeat them, so we start off by doing just that. At least, that's what Pit thinks, until Lady Palutena says otherwise. Apparently Hydra heads can live without a body, so we go down to land and search for each head one by one to make sure that he's officially dead. Chapter 4. Palutena starts telling Pit about Reapers, and that they come from a place called the Reaper Boulevard, whereby Pit asks Palutena if they really have to go there, and well, with her silence, it meant that they did. This is because Palutena wants to find one of Medusa's commanders, called Pandora, the goddess of disaster and calamity. So our job is to infiltrate the Reaper Fortress, and at the end of the level, we fight the Great Reaper, and that was chapter 4. Our destination for this chapter is called Pandora's Labyrinth of Deceit. So we fly straight into a space pocket. This is Pandora's Labyrinth, full of illusions. And once we land, we get to a place where the ground keeps moving away. And man, I kept falling down and making loads of mistakes. At least we got introduced to the best character in the game, according to Liam and my good mate. This character is called Dark Pit, and we get introduced to Dark Pit after the first stage of the boss battle against Pandora. After Pit runs and jumps through the Mirror of Truth, breaking it, then Dark Pit comes out of the other side of the broken mirror. Dark Pit was supposed to help Pandora to kill Pit, but he had a mind of his own and decided to kill Pandora instead, just so that he could take her powers for himself. And then Dark Pit flies away. Chapter 6. Palutena has located Dark Pit, and then the fight begins with some awesome background music, otherwise known as Dark Pit's theme. Then Medusa shows up, and she thinks that Dark Pit is her servant. She actually says since Dark Pit was created through the Mirror of Truth, his alliance should be with the Underworld Army. But he's not. He does what he wants when he wants. And that's Dark Pit for you. All I needed to do now in this chapter was to follow and eventually fight Pitu, as Lady Palutena calls him. You know, as in Pit number 2. Get it? I don't know if I'm a big fan of that nickname. In this chapter, the mission is to kill a boss named Thanatos. Apparently, he was one of the main bosses in the original Kid Icarus game. So Palutena says to Pit that he needs to go down a place beneath the ocean, and then she splits the sea in half, just so that Pit could go through down to a place he needed to go to. Well, Pit was very impressed that Palutena could do that, until Lord Poseidon shows up and says that she was lying to him, and that he was the person that did that whole sea business thing, as Pit put it. Later, a bad guy shows up, and his name is Thanatos, and he tells Pit and Palutena that he's the right-hand man of Medusa, and to get to Medusa, they would have to first go through him, and that's exactly what we did. Chapter 8. Today's mission is to revive the 3 sacred treasures, and to get all of this, all I needed to do was to kill the boss, the Kraken. And now I have all 3 sacred treasures, and that was it. Chapter 9. Now we are ready for the final battle against Medusa, and with the 3 sacred treasures, and the difficulty being at easy. Yeah, I know, I suck. It was pretty easy. So we went down a ravine that takes us to the underworld. This is where Medusa lives. But before I got there, I needed to fight all the old bosses I fought at the beginning of the game. Fighting bosses like Twinabo, Hydra, and Pandora. After all of that, I got to the fight against Medusa. And now this is where the whole game changes. I defeated Medusa. And the end credits started, everyone is celebrating, and then the true villain appears. And that is none other than Hades. And man, he looks far more threatening than Medusa. And that was the end of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. Hades is after something called the Wish Seed. The Wish Seed grants any wish in the world. That's why Pit needs to obtain the Wish Seed before Hades does. But to get there, I needed to go through a lava and fire surrounded level that I found pretty frustrating because I'm bad. And eventually, fight a boss called the Immortal Phoenix, and that was Chapter 10. Chapter 11. Because of Hades' revival, all of humanity were going crazy as war broke loose on Earth. All because Hades spread a rumor about the Wish Seed, and the humans believed him, even though the Wish Seed was fake. Then a massive explosion happens as Palutena makes sure Pit is unharmed, and that's how the level begins. This is how the goddess of nature gets introduced, and she is called Feridi. She's doing this because she hates the fact that the humans are fighting like that and harming the planet Earth, all because of a fake wish. Feridi then introduces us to one of her finest warriors, Krakelance. Then Pit falls and the level continues. All we needed to do was find our way to the boss called the Krakelance. Chapter 12. So we start with Palutena saying that Hades and Feridi are fighting, where Pit asks why would they be fighting in the first place? Whereby Feridi answers by saying that the underworld army are even worse than the humans. Feridi's plan is to plant another reset bomb somewhere, but Palutena doesn't know where exactly. Then they see the bomb falling from the sky and Pit goes after it. So the first boss of the level is to fight a bomb? Interesting. Then we go back to the land and go after the reset bomb for good. And this is where I slowly started getting annoyed, because after I had destroyed the reset bomb and completed the level, Chapter 13 started. Man, I had struggled playing through these levels, and I was only playing at standard difficulty. I was finding it too difficult. So difficult, I decided to play it on easy mode. Yeah, so Chapter 13 started. And we get introduced to 2 moons? Yeah, so we go into the second moon, and get introduced to the main boss of this level, called the Lunar Saturn. But before I got to him, I was stopped by Liam's favorite character, Dark Pit, or Pit 2. Now let's get this straight. I'm playing on easy difficulty, and I died. And not only in the fight against Dark Pit, also trying to get to the main final boss of the level against the Lunar Saturn. I don't know what to say. I'm just so bad. It's so annoying. Chapter 14. Now Hades and Faridi's forces are working together, wreaking havoc. They even went and revived one of the first bosses in the game called Thanatos. Then we get introduced to Pandora, the goddess of lightning, and our job is, well, like the other times, to stop and defeat her. Then Palutena takes us to the Thundercloud Temple, where Pandora lives, and all we needed to do was to complete the level and fight Pandora. Pretty easy chapter. I think my mood is changing after that. Chapter 15. Now here is where my mood started to change about this game. And that was because of the weapon I was using. Yeah, I googled it. I googled what the best weapon is for this game, and I was using the wrong one. I must say, it's a lot easier now. Even though I'm still playing at standard difficulty. We get attacked by a ton of monsters, and for the first time, Palutena does not know who's giving them the order to do this. Even Hades has no idea where they're coming from. But they were invading Earth. This is when Pyron gets introduced. Pyron, the sun god, and he's a good guy. He helps us through the level, making my life once again a lot easier. He also knows about these enemies and where they're coming from. Then at the end of the level, I had to destroy the atom core. Not a lot happened here. Chapter 16. Palutena starts off by saying that the atom core has not been defeated, and that they needed to destroy their next fleet. But they needed to find it, and well, for the first time ever, Palutena couldn't find an entrance. So for some reason, I still don't know why, Hades decides to help them? Yeah, I must be missing something here. So the level continues, and all we needed to do was shut down the Hive power generator, and that's just what I did. Chapter 17. Now in this chapter, the sun god comes and helps us again. Well, that's what we think, because they're after something called the atom brain. So they go and attack the atom brain? Now instead of attacking and destroying it, the sun god decides to fuse with it, because he wanted more power. However, this also made him evil. And now the goal was to stop and defeat him. And oh god, the complaining starts again. Am I just that bad? Yeah, I must be. I mean, I died like 2 times just getting to the boss. And then I got to the boss and died. Died over and over and over again. I got so annoyed. This was only difficulty 2. I'm so bad. I had to Google it. And then I felt very stupid. I kept trying to kill him directly instead of destroying the shield thingy that's surrounding him. And well, yeah, I did it. At least it's over. Chapter 18. So at this point I decided to do one more level. And because of how the last one went, I went back to difficulty easy. Yeah, it did make my life a lot easier. And this is where the story really takes a turn. We start off with a ring, and this ring is on the floor at a random place. And Pit wakes up, and all he could remember was that he defeated the Arum, and the name of the Chaos Kin stuck in his brain. Then a kid picks the ring up, and Pit realizes that he's the ring? The kid puts the ring on her finger, and then Pit has full control. Then he trips over and the ring slides off the kid's finger, and then a dog picks it up. And like you would expect, Pit had now full control of this dog, and he walks around trying to find out what's going on. And then he bumps into Magnus. Magnus is the guy that was introduced in chapter 1, but Magnus doesn't understand dogs. I mean, I can't understand a dog either, so I can't blame him. Lol. So Pit jumps on Magnus to get his attention. Magnus then grabs the ring and looks at it, and then he throws it away. Later he turns around and puts the ring on. And now Pit couldn't be any happier. Magnus immediately recognizes his voice, and he can't control his own body. That's because Pit is in complete control now. Then Magnus says the last time they spoke was 3 years ago. Pit couldn't believe it. What, 3 years? What actually happened? Magnus then explained what had happened and that they needed to find Pit's body. And that's the first boss of the level. Pit defeats Pit's body using Magnus's body, and now Pit is back. Now the only thing Pit needed to do was go back to the fly world. But he didn't know how to. Magnus even suggested to fly over there, but Pit can't fly. So he started calling for Palutena, and then he starts flying into the air. Then Faridi shows up and says that Palutena has changed. But how is Pit flying then? Well, apparently she could do this too. When Palutena shows up, she says that she had made a turn of sides and she had enough of the humans. Pit thinks that she was being manipulated, but Faridi says that she wasn't being manipulated at all, and this was reality. Bam, this was a good chapter. Chapter 19. I remember when I said that I was bad at this game? Well, in today's chapter, I really sucked. It was once again very annoying, the fact that I was just this bad. But I'm not here to complain. I'm here to fulfill my promise that I had made with Liam about 10 years ago. So in this chapter, we started the mission to save Lady Palutena. To get there, we needed to call the Lightning Chariot. Now, let me get this straight. I'm playing on easy difficulty, 1.9 to be exact, and I died about 3 times, I think. The amount of times I kept falling from these platforms, I don't know what to say. I'm bad. But I completed this chapter. From now on, I'm gonna be playing on the easiest mode there is. Sorry if I've offended anyone, but I need to keep my promise. Chapter 20. Okay, this was a good chapter. I also think that putting the difficulty on the easiest mode, otherwise known as 0-0 to be exact, was a good idea. I mean, I really enjoyed it. For the first time since I turned this game on, I can actually say that I enjoyed it. And for the story, well, I've already said it. This story is fantastic. Especially this chapter. In this chapter, we attempt to save Lady Palutena. So we go on a journey to find her. And once we do, we have to fight her? Well, we fight the thing that was controlling her. And once we've done that, Palutena's soul gets captured and gets sent to the Chaos Vortex, or just a different dimension for those that don't know what a Chaos Vortex is. I don't blame you. Obviously, Pit's mission is to save her, and he asks Faridi to fly him over there. Once he starts flying, the entrance starts to shrink and misses his chance to go through. That's where Dark Pit comes into action, and with the Lightning Carrot, he breaks another pass to the Chaos Vortex, with Dark Pit saying that there's no time to waste and that they have to go through and work together. And that's how the chapter ends. Chapter 21. Remember when I said chapter 20 was a good chapter? Well, this was even better. Pit enters the Chaos Vortex, and then Faridi says that Dark Pit already went ahead. The Chaos Vortex is like the name suggests, and yeah, it's pretty chaotic in there, and we are after the monster that had captured Lady Palutena. So after the flying section, we land in a sort of arena, and this is where the very long battle starts, with waves of underworld monsters attacking. When I say waves, I mean waves. So long that at wave 9, Dark Pit decides to give Pit a little help. Then Pit asks Dark Pit why he was so interested to help him, whereby Dark Pit answers by saying that when Pit was turned into that ring, Dark Pit was unable to move. I mean, they are twins after all. I know a lot about being twins. Probably because I am one. So Dark Pit is here to help. And then the Chaos King decides to show up. And well, the Chaos King is the thing that had captured Palutena, and the boss battle begins. Playing on this difficulty made the boss very easy. So Pit and Pitu defeat the Chaos King and Palutena's back. What Pit and Pitu didn't know was that the Chaos King hadn't fully been defeated yet. And then the Chaos King jumps at Pitu from behind and takes him to another dimension. So Pit runs after him and tries to save Dark Pit. But to do that, Pit needed to fly. And well, the powers of flight had already been used. But he pursued Viridi to use the power of flight anyway. And then he saved Dark Pit. But Pit became unconscious. And like what was said in the start of the game, his wings had burned up into flames. Chapter 22. My lucky number. And let's get this straight. I am writing this bit before I even started playing Chapter 22. And thinking about it now, it makes a lot of sense. Since I know that in this chapter you play as Dark Pit. I know this because Liam had told me this literally today. I'm not mad at him. Let's get that straight. To be fair with him, he doesn't even know that I'm playing this game right now. So it's all good. I'm smiling. So as I said before, we start with Dark Pit. So Jules, you better add the Dark Pit theme right now. That's if it's not copyrighted. Yeah, that can be a problem sometimes. So now, Dark Pit jumps into the level to help cure Pit. And man, let's get this straight. I am playing at difficulty 0.0 and I'm playing as freaking Dark Pit. And I still managed to die at the start of the level. I'm so bad at this. It's comical. I don't know if I should feel embarrassed or happy right now. Anyway, Dark Pit goes to the underworld to see Hades. Palutena advises Dark Pit to avoid any of his attacks at any cost, and to move on to help and recover Pit. Then he gets to the thing called the Rewind Spring, and as the name implies, it can return things into their original state. But the moment Dark Pit arrives, he gets reintroduced to Pandora, and then the boss battle begins. Dark Pit wins. Then Pandora jumps into the Rewind Spring, and now she's a hot anime chick? WTH? So Dark Pit finishes the mighty Pandora off once and for all, and after all of that, Dark Pit dips Pit's wings into the spring, and then Pit regains consciousness and is back. Dark Pit leaves like always, but for some reason is unable to fly. So Viridi helps him, and they go on to the next chapter. Chapter 23. So now Pit is ready to take on Hades. With the 3 sacred treasures, Pit heads out. And then guess who shows up? Well, it's obviously Hades, since Pit and Palutena are in his realm. And that's when the battle begins. And after Hades gets hurt, he gets annoyed and decides to eat him? Yeah, Hades eats Pit, but luckily for Pit, Pit survives in the stomach of Hades. Even Hades was surprised about that. The only problem is now is that Pit cannot communicate with Palutena at all. He can only communicate with, well, Hades, and that's exactly what they do. Hades starts saying stuff like that there's no way out for Pit and in a few months he will be devoured. That's until Pit finds a way to his heart, and then the boss battle begins. And well, after that, guess who comes and helps Pit out of Hades' body? Hell yeah, none other than Dark Pit. And then the chapter ends with Hades being alive. Chapter 24. Before the final battle begins, Palutena wants Pit to go to the person who created the 3 sacred treasures, because she was hoping that he could make him a new weapon for Pit to use against Hades. The only problem is that the person who created the 3 sacred treasures isn't particularly on Pit's or Palutena's side. Once Pit gets introduced to him, he calls him Dinos, whereby Dinos replies by saying it's Lord Dinos for you, since he is a god after all. Palutena apologizes for his behalf and tells him that she was hoping he would make him a weapon for Pit, so that he could take on Hades once and for all. Then Lord Dinos says that he will only make a weapon for Pit if he could pass his 3 trials. Only then will he make the weapon to defeat Hades. In these trials, Pit needs to refight bosses from the beginning of the game, like the Kraken and stuff. In the second trial, he fights Magnus for the first time. And then, the last trial, Dinos makes Pit fight a possessed version of Palutena. And after all of that, he gets rewarded with the weapon to defeat Hades. And now, we're at the last chapter of the game. So now the proper final battle begins. It's Hades versus Pit. But this time, I decided to challenge myself. After all, it's the final chapter. And man, that was a mistake. Now keep in mind that this was still only on standard difficulty, but I died about 6 times. And about 5 times in the same section, just because I'm so bad. Even though it was the end boss, I don't know. It's over now though. I beat the game. My promise has been fulfilled. And I must say, it was a good game. Not my favorite though. I hope I haven't offended anyone by saying that. But I did enjoy it, especially when I put it on easy mode. And for the final boss, I was surprised. To think Medusa came in to help us just because she hated the fact that Hades kept reviving and she didn't want to play the puppet no more. This made Hades very mad and killed Medusa off once and for all, making Hades transform into his final form. At this point, Pit's ultimate weapon had been destroyed by Hades, so Faridi uses the power of flight to chase Hades as Palutena makes an overpowered laser gun thing with the parts of the weapon that Lord Dinos had made for him. Then all that was needed was to wait until the weapon was fully loaded and then to finish Hades off once and for all. And that was it. Now, before I end this video, I told Liam that I played this game a couple of days ago, and apparently you can make overpowered weapons, and apparently if you control Pit a certain way in the air, like rotating, it makes the game a lot easier. And I didn't know this, and that's why I was so bad apparently. So yeah, anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and if you have, click the like button and maybe even consider subscribing. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you guys all next time. Goodbye.